Hey, hello, everybody. Paul Soul here with Text Potential. I am your host. As you've seen, this is number 6. So hopefully we've brought in some more viewers, and I've got a super special guest that I'll talk about here in a second with Dr. Wanda Eugene. It really is a chance for me to honor the 25 years of the corridor and look at what's out there in the future across the corridor when it comes to the neat, creative people, the things that are happening, the stuff that they're doing, the connections that they're making. It really is part and parcel to what the corridor does. So today I am super excited to be speaking with Dr. Wanda Eugene. And let me go through a little bit of a bio because I don't want to mess this up because she's got more degrees than I will ever have in my life. The director of the Collaboratory for the Inclusive Entrepreneurship at UF Innovate. She's a triathlete and actor, holds a PhD in computer science, 15 years experience in a bunch of stuff, progressive programming, project evaluation, funding and management, both on the academic side as well as the nonprofit side. She is passionate about leveraging technology to engage underserved and we like to call underestimated communities because we just, as she can attest to, they are communities kind of across the corridor, really across the state, that often don't see themselves in our world that I would love to have them see themselves in what we do. Um, she's passionate about leveraging technology to engage those communities. And I'm gonna hit you up with a question on something I saw from you, Wanda, in a previous call, and really to support women and minority groups interested in starting their own businesses in the Collaboratory for Inclusive Entrepreneurship at UF Innovate. I invited Wanda here, and we met last year to really talk about building diverse, innovative communities. And I want to show how her work supporting women and people of color really are accelerating Florida in that world. So Wanda, welcome. It's great to see you. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for
I'm gonna
having me.
I'm gonna jump right into it. So let's start with your story. Take us through sort of when you got into education, what you first studied, how that led to the advanced degrees, and really where you are today.
Ooh, okay. I'll take you back even further than that.
Okay.
Coming out of high school, I actually wanted to be a theater major. And my physics teachers told me the broke artist is played out, and I needed to major in something that I can actually eat with. And she said, I'm not trying to take away from doing theater, and you can always do that, but let's major in something, that you can pay bills at the same time. And so she convinced me to explore engineering. I didn't know what engineering was. I never met an engineer at that time. And, my family's from the Caribbean. I'm from Haiti. And, there was always two models of success. You become a doctor or you become a lawyer. I couldn't stand the sight of blood. So law was kind of where my focus. And so as a happy middle, she convinced me to explore patent law. And patent law, you need a technical, a STEM background to pursue. And so that was kind of what got me on that journey. In the process, I discovered I loved engineering, and I'd finally found my tribe. And it was like I was always kind of the weird, quirky kid amongst my social circles, but now I found more of them and more of me. But at the time, I was so laser focused. I'm just passing through. I'm on the way to do what I'm supposed to do, which is law. So I thought. I got another mentor along the way who wasn't so sure if patent law was the right thing for me. So she convinced me to defer enrollment into law school, and she got me a job at the patent office. And the agreement was I spend a year there and then decide if truly I was on the right path. After about 2 months, I realized I made a horrible career mistake and I was not designed for that at all.
Right. Right.
And so I tried to, finish out my term there. But then it was like, well, what do I do next? And I was living in DC at the time after working from the patent office. And I remember going into a grocery store, and this was at the height of the digital divide. And I remember seeing a guy come into the store, and he was having some trouble. He wanted to apply for a job as a bagger, and they pointed to the computer and said, "Have at it. That's where you apply." And he looked so defeated, and he walked out. And I was like, we're creating a problem where the ownership of the problem is on the users. And that doesn't make sense to me. And so I kind of like kept picking at the problem. And at this time, I'm about to leave the patent office. And a friend of mine was like, well, you know, a rule of thumb, you don't know what you want to do with your life, go back to school. And so I kind of went back with this problem, just kind of curious as to how do we change that dynamic, right? How do we really just focus on the users that that had these true needs, but build the technology around them. And fast forward, I ended up in grad school studying computer science, user centered design, a human centered design. And so like I'd finally found an area that allowed me to do the two things that I really love, helping people and my strength, which is tech. After I finished my PhD, we were working on some research on helping people with disabilities voting and voting technology. And one thing I learned when working with the disability community was, well, it was two things. We all have a disability. If you live long enough, you'll get to yours, right? Your
Yeah.
eyesight starts to fade, your ear, you're hearing something. We'll all get to our disability, right?
Yep.
But the other thing I learned about working with the people with disability or the disability community is if you design something for those of us that have a limitation, you make things better for everybody. And so then that opened my eyes up into how we think about design and how we do design, especially for communities that are normally not the focus of our design and development efforts. So how do we do that in how we create, not just create technology, but how do we create these rich interactions and knowledge learning so that people are not just consumers of tech, but creators of tech? Because we're all creating something. That was one of the things I did learn from the patent office, which I loved my time there. I just realized it wasn't the right career choice for me. But
Mhm.
one of the things I learned from the patent office is there's really no new innovation. All of our innovations are small tweaks on things that are already existing.
Mhm.
And so when you think about the things that we do around the house, just kind of everyday things, we're always kind of like makeshifting something. Like I don't have X right now, so I'm going to use Y and Z in these particular manners. So we're always innovating, but we don't always have the right tools and knowledge set to know where to situate those new innovations. And so I think it's the same thing with, with kind of creating these opportunities for these different communities, is giving them the tools where they can leverage the knowledge that they know, the resources that they have, and the things that they've created into these spaces where they can have systematic change in their own communities, right?
A couple of things just resonate with me, Wanda. And again, it's why, oh yeah, this is why I love talking to you. One is that community piece. One of the things I noticed coming down here after 33 years in the Navy and really jumping into something that I did not know. I didn't know entrepreneurship. I didn't know innovation. I wanted to learn, and that, to your point about communities and community driven, and going to the community as a way to, just like you highlighted, is that a patent? I know plenty of groups that are probably could patent everything that they do, which I think is
Yeah.
which I think is awesome. Um, the other thing that resonates with me is being a creator. Not just a user of tech, but a creator,
Hmm.
and that uniqueness where I just think in Florida as an example, and I'm going to ask you what brought you to Florida as a state and what you see here in that world. But I see just so many things, so much of a creative communities that we have, and what they can do with the assets. You talk a lot about, let's get the assets on the table and let's look at what we've got, which I think is a huge part of it. In your own background, so how'd you get back to UF?
Yeah, so so it's a couple things. My team I was a postdoc at Clemson, and my department chair, Dr. Juan Gilbert, was brought on to UF, and in the process of onboarding him to UF, he decided he wanted his team. And so we were all then, not all, but a lot of us were brought on. So the team was then brought here. And so I was the first person on board because I'm a Florida girl. So I was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I did my undergraduate at Florida State, my master's at FAMU. So I'm Florida all the way around. Though I've been a nomad and I've lived in lots of different cities, countries, and states, Florida's home for me. And one of the things I've always loved in all the places I've explored is the diversity of Florida. And that diversity ranges across so many different levels, people, food, culture, the biodiversity. I'm also very much an outside girl. So all these different things like has always kind of brought me back home. And so I still love exploring, but I'm always going to be a Florida girl. So that's how I got back here to Gainesville. I'm not faculty anymore. I switched
Okay.
over from faculty last year to work at UF Innovate because in my prior role here, so when we came to Florida, like I said, I was initially doing some of the work with the disability community, but then I shifted because we got an opportunity to explore.
So that's amazing, and I love the your story about because you're gathering data all along, so you're trying to understand, and then as you think about directly into an incubator is probably not you hit a bit of a wall, so let's do the pre-incubator thing, which I think is awesome. As I think about the corridor and I think about this world of a lot of us we're ecosystem builders, right? We're helping create these things. What's your thought on how we collectively in the ecosystem building world could do a better job designing things so that women, people of color, other underestimated groups can see themselves and everybody's going to hit barriers, but are there things that you've learned now over the
Mhm.
journey of 5 years that we could take aboard the corridor and I'm going to ask you about partnerships in a second, but that we can share with others that the magic that you're learning?
Yeah, so I think it was two things I realized is a lot of these opportunities, and there's a lot of great programs around the state, but a lot of them are heavily siloed. So if you don't live in the right places, or if you don't have the right connections, or don't check a certain box, then the opportunities don't apply to you. And it's really unfortunate because, you would always kind of find people on that peripheral, right, where they have all the right things, but they're not, they don't live in a major metropolitan city in the state, or they don't whatever, because a lot of our programs are very much it depends upon kind of where our funding sources come from, stipulates who can participate, who can play, right? And it becomes very problematic because somebody is inevitably left out. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting and fortunate with my role is because I'm at a state institution, I was able to overcome a lot of those barriers and bridge some of those gaps. And so I was able to partner with a lot of these community partners that, they had their various restrictions, but we were able to pipeline some of our entrepreneurs and help kind of alleviate some of the burdens, that was faced in terms of being able to onboard, or some of the communities that, or not communities, entities that didn't necessarily collaborate.
So talk about lessons learned and those kinds of partnerships that you see that are, from my view, you're leveraging all the great things that you're doing in your sphere of influence, and then can be that Switzerland. So talk us through some of those partnerships and where those might lead in the future.
Yeah, so the partnerships was an interesting journey. I when I first came to this role, I had just moved here to Gainesville, so I wasn't well connected in this space, and so it was very hard initially, kind of getting traction, because I was trying to go the route of, okay, these are the key players in the entrepreneurship sector in the city. Let me see how to participate with them. But one of the things I realized, we weren't always targeting the same audiences the same kind of ways. And so I had to go a lot more grassroots. And so your community organizers, your church, your community centers, very much, old school, because that was what worked here in this local community. And so one of the things we found is every time before pre-pandemic, we ran our programs in person. And so what we learned quickly is for every community that we ran the program in person, we had to learn how that community gets their information. Who are the key players that has that connection, right? Because, as a new person in town, you don't have that repertoire. So who are the people that already had that kind of relationship with the communities, that trust that we could then collaborate with? And so we worked initially here in Gainesville to do the same, but like the next community we tried that with to see, can we replicate this, was in Miami. So we partnered with the grassroots organization that were already doing the work, because there was no sense in reinventing the wheel. And then from those partnerships, we initially just studied the community. We held focus groups, right? We went to some of the community meetings. We wanted to understand the needs and language in the community, as opposed to kind of coming in on our, on our horse, like we're here to save the day. There's a lot of great things already happening. And how do we leverage that and layer on with that some of the programs? Because, at the end of the day, when our program is done, we're out of there.
Yeah.
And who are the ones that are going to have to continue the work? And that was something that we learned when we first launched, when we first started talking to communities, and they were resistant. And they was like, you universities, and I've heard this before in other research I've done, there's like universities do the same thing. They come in, with their great grant funding and their great hopes, and they make a lot of promises, and they disrupt the way things are for a little while, and then they're out of here, and then we're left to pick up the pieces. And we didn't want to be another one of that. And so when we partnered with the community, we made some tall promises, right? But it was on the backs of the people that was already doing that work. And it was like, we're here to support these communities that are going to be the ones to sustain the work long after we're gone. And so that was really important to us in everywhere that we operate. And that continues to be important.
One of the things you just highlighted, definitely, I've seen and I learned from first from an individual down here, Eddie Morton, who runs Lift Orlando. And that
Mhm.
is, you know, don't do things for communities and for people. You do them with people. You do
Yes.
them with teams, because and I'm 33 years in the Navy. I'm in this mental model that I have to break about. We're here from the government. We're here to help, and nobody really cares. And they really care, though, when what I see is when you meet, and you highlighted it, when you meet them where they are and start there. And sure, it takes time, but I see that passion in you. And I'll just share with you for the audience, and I will edit this out if this gets you into trouble, but I think it was great. One of the places we met was in Synapse Converge down here,
Mhm.
and there had been a comment in the crowd that said, the problem is we're just short of really good ideas. And I watched you kind of get out of your chair and go, that is not the issue. And now what's fun for me is, Wanda, is now I know where that came from. I know that, you're just the background that you've highlighted, and your work in the patent office and having those calls, saying, "Hey, I got this great idea." It is not the problem. The problem is not this somehow lack of good ideas, and it's meeting folks where they are, and that partnership piece, I think, is so important.
Yeah, no, that actually has been something that I've been professing, I guess, for a long time ago. Like I mentioned before, my family's from Haiti. I grew up with a lot of people from a lot of islands. In some of my prior work in culturally relevant computing, I spent a lot of time working with indigenous. I've worked in the outback in Australia, and one of the things I realized is we have this fallacy that people who have in developing countries or in these other communities that have a lack of resources or have a lack of innovation or ideas, and that is the furthest from the truth. And growing up, I would watch my parents and my family and the stuff they would create, because we didn't have a lot growing up, and the stuff they would come up with and create, and just the creativity that would come out of our communities, like, baffled me. And so when I would hear this rhetoric as I'm doing my research and my work, and I'm like, that's the furthest from the truth. Like, it's nothing but creativity, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so it's like it was just kind of this thing that's always infuriated me when I hear like we don't have enough ideas. It's
Mm.
like, no, that is not the problem. Like, you got to be kidding me. We have nothing but ideas, right?
Yeah.
And so like it's just, and I've lived that life. I've seen it. I've experienced it, firsthand. And to kind of come out of that community, come out of that space, and hear that, it's like, I take it very personal. Like, like, don't discredit us like that. Don't discredit our knowledge, right? And
Yeah.
I actually remember one of the community meetings I went to in Miami, and they were kind of, some of the people in the community were were venting about some of the community partners that come into the community. And I'll never forget when the women said, one of my biggest pet peeve is how they bring this information to us. It's like, we're poor, we're not stupid. And they keep coming in here like we don't know any better, or we're not knowledgeable. And that's not the case.
Yeah.
We just don't have the access and the resources, but we're very knowledgeable and we're very much engaged, and we just need the opportunity. And I think that's kind of the thing when I hear anything that points to that, like my blood boils. It's like, no, stop counting people out, because it's not fair.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not fair. And I look, I'm sort of beyond the fairness piece. To me, it's a business imperative. It's an innovation invention imperative. Is there a question I didn't ask you? Is there something you'd like to share with the group before I close this thing out?
Well, you did ask, I don't think I got to it, but you were asking about our 10 and 5 program, and
Yeah,
that's kind of our
yeah,
current initiative. So that's our partnership with FIU Mission to Market program. And it's kind of, the founder of the Mission to Market program, Chris Ford, and I brainstormed and we run similar programs and initiatives and have similar passions. And we started kind of comparing notes of kind of some of our frustrations that we were seeing in terms of, providing resources for entrepreneurs, and then, really being able to bridge the gap. And so we wanted to create a pipeline program. And so 10 and 5 is essentially that pipeline program, where it's a 3-part program where we look at entrepreneurs at the ideation stage, at the monetization stage, and scale up stage, and provide resources for them. Because one of the things, like, I was getting entrepreneurs at the ideation stage, and they'll finish our program and be like, okay, what do I do next? And it was like, well, we don't have that resource, and then and so forth. And Chris was getting people who were kind of too early on. He was like, oh, you'll be great if you have these skills. And it's like, well, come to us. And so then we decided to kind of create this pipeline program. But our goal or the question that drove this program was, we realized for everyone's not going to be a tech entrepreneur, right? And some of the entrepreneurs that come to our program, that within the first couple of weeks, they realize this isn't a journey for them, and we actually count that as a win, right? Because what you realize is, instead of spending 3 years, $20,000, etc., on something that's never going to happen, you realize in about 2 weeks this is not the journey for you. And so that is something that we look at, is how do we kind of help people really understand what does it take to be successful in this place, and how does this align with where they are currently in their livelihoods. And so we try to kind of help them do that exploration, and then package them with the right tools and resources and knowledge to kind of make that journey. But in there, we realize there's a number, about 1 in 5 of all our entrepreneurs are really in the space in their life and have the resources to really kind of run with it. So then we started exploring, well, for every 1 in 5 that we work with, what does it take to kind of create these tech unicorns, as Chris liked to call them, right? And so these tech unicorns are the ones that can go to mile, right? They can create these high growth, high valuation companies. But at the same time, every time you find that 1 in 5, the 4 that you've impacted, they are still going to do some amazing things, even if it's not in the tech entrepreneurship sector. And so that's kind of where this 10 and 5 came in from, right? If we can identify these 10 entrepreneurs in the course of 5 years that can truly run that distance, we then end up impacting about 90 other entrepreneurs that will still continue to do amazing things, because they have been impacted. They've received that knowledge, they've received the opportunity, they received the resources. They will either pass it down to their kids or their neighbor or their community. They will either turn this into other entrepreneurship endeavors. They might turn out to be like that top employee at this company, because they now understand things a little differently. It has kind of this ripple effect that then happens. And so that's kind of where the 10 and 5 program came from.
yeah.
And so that's kind of, the initiative that, we kicked off this year, and it's been really exciting to kind of see it kind of play out.
Yeah, and I can't wait to learn more about it. Thank you for joining us. Again, it gives me a chance really to just provide a glimpse for you into these bright minds of the corridor. And I look forward to everybody coming back to episode number 7, which, quite frankly, I don't know who's on yet, but we're going to figure that one out. So, Wanda, thank you very, very much. Have a blessed day, and thanks to the folks in the corridor and outside as well.